Before the video begins, this video has two parts. The first part I will be talking about is the main primary weapons that we have on the preset weapons. And then on the next video I will be talking about the secondary slots. So, yeah, that is all I have to offer. Goodbye. Just by making this video, I already want to shoot myself. Hello and welcome. Today I will be ranking all the preset weapons that are included in Payday 3. The way I will be ranking them are these three categories: the effectiveness during loud, their attachments, and their design. I'm not gonna waste any time, so let's just get straight into it. The first one on the list is the free weapon that is provided to everyone that claimed it through the Starbreeze Nebula website. That being the good old Car 4 Old Faithful preset. Despite its simplicity, the overall effectiveness of the weapon is really great. It has a solid rate of fire, pretty good amount of damage, pretty good recoil and handling, and the iron sights that it has is actually pretty good. It's not one of those iron sights where you cannot see shit, but rather you can sort of see stuff. Everything about the weapon is just simply great. There's no flaw to it that I can name. Even against heavy SWAT units and shields, it is able to kill them really easily with the right skills. The only complaint I really has is that it suffers a kill at long range due to the iron sights being somewhat complicated, to say the least. So I would give the overall weapon effectiveness rating at an 8 out of 10. It's a powerful rifle that can kill almost anything at close to mid-range, but somewhat suffers at long range. But it's not really particularly bad. The attachments may not exactly seem like it doesn't have much, but the main point is how useful they are for the weapon itself and how it will make a difference. The attachments of the Old Faithful is the hybrid muzzle brake, which both reduces the vertical and horizontal recoil, making it much easier to control, but increases the time it takes to aim down the sights, which doesn't really affect that much. Recoil is not really a particularly huge issue for the Car 4 since it's really easy to control, and the increased ADS time is not really particularly that bad, so you can just practically ignore it. It also has the speed pull magazine, which allows you to reload the weapon much more faster, which despite it's simple, it allows you to be able to hop straight into battle without having to worry about it being rushed by the enemies. So the overall attachments I would give is a 7 out of 10. The only complaint I would have is that it doesn't have any sights. That's pretty much it. Other than that, it's pretty good. It doesn't need any sort of auto modifications except the sight itself, like I said. Visually, it may not seem that amazing, since it's a conversion to the basic bitch M4 that every single American loved for some apparent reason, to the chat called M16. And the M16 is the only American weapon I genuinely love in real life. Meanwhile, any other American weapon that is existing, I despise sincerely. But regardless, the overall aesthetic of the weapon gets a solid 6 out of 10. Normally I would give it 7 if it had some colors here and there, but it doesn't have any, so... Again, it's nothing new, it's simple, but nice looking. Next up on the list is the disgusting invention that is the Scar Featherlight. Do I really need to say about the effectiveness of the weapon? Fine, okay. It has the capability of one-shotting 99% of the enemies with only edge itself on close to mid-range. And that's the only positive thing about it. And on to the negatives, which is a lot. The recoil jumps around like it's a cowgirl doing cowgirl moves, the rate of fire is slower than the geriatric old man trying to fucking run, the magazine capacity is shorter than a dwarf itself, and the hipfire accuracy is less accurate than a blizzard promises. But the fact that it's capable of one-shotting 99% of the enemies without any effort makes it a 8 out of 10 effectiveness. The attachments are somewhat mixed since it makes the weapon even more uncontrollable, but also it makes the weapon slightly better in a way. The light frame struck, it decreases the time it takes to ADS and makes it where when you transition to sprinting to fire is much more faster. However, the hipfire spread is much less accurate, meaning it's much more widened, and the overall recoil is completely cucked, as if it's not already fucked up. Secondly, the perforated grip, it decreases the time it takes to aim down the sights and makes the transition to shooting to fire much more quicker. But the overall gun kick of the weapon is practically non-existent, so you're gonna have to be a veteran of beating children to be able to handle the weapon. YouTube, I am joking. If you can't handle the recoil, then stay the fuck away from it. But if you can handle it, then it might be effective. But for God's sakes, don't hip fire with this thing. You're gonna hit someone's grandmother, then accidentally hitting a bulldozer that is standing still. So you might as well just be at their fucking faces. So overall, it gets a 5 out of 10. The visual design looks okay. It's nice. I like the dark gray and the red color to it, but I'm not really sure what exactly the drawing is on the weapon. It looks like some sort of a mosquito or a bug in a way, but hey, I can't tell, but regardless, it does genuinely look nice, so I give it a 7 out of 10. Next on the list is the worst preset weapon to ever exist in human history, that being the Civ Commando Kick Murder. One of the worst in my opinion.
I wouldn't ask my worst enemy to take a shit in.
What are you trying to say?
It's awful.
And I will get into that why. Firstly, ever since the Scythe commando got buffed, it has an actual purpose, but this preset weapon practically fucks it over sideways while it was dry. Firstly, it is indeed effective, it kills light enemies quickly, deletes them instantly, it's accurate when hip firing, and it has great recoil and easy handling, but the problem is, it's fucking horrid at mid to long range, and the magazine capacity is so bad that you might as well just become Mike Tyson at this point and just bite someone's ear off. The overall effectiveness of the weapon itself is a 7 out of 10, but the attachments are the main reason the preset weapon is literally the worst. Firstly, the compact magazine reduces the amount of ammo there is inside the magazine of the weapon from 25 to 20, but increases the reserve ammo and the reload speed. You might think that is nice, but keep in mind the SMGs have a better ammo pickup rate and the speed pull mag literally exists. And considering the fact that Scythe Commando has an extremely fast rate of fire, you're going to be reloading like a fucking bitch. And the obsolete suppressor just practically makes the weapon way worse in mid to long range, because why not? Let's just make the attachment much more horrid. But hey, the overall spread is much more tighter, so fucking yeepee, I guess. 1 out of 10, it's horrid. And why is this a preset weapon? It doesn't even have any difference to the basic weapon. The only difference is it has 3 scars. That's it. The only thing there is just 3 scars, and it just practically screams,
"Cut my life into pieces. This is my last resort. Suffocation."
Okay, I got a little bit out of topic. Next on the line is the Thunder Scythe. The sniper rifle itself is very effective. However, due to its slow cocking time, it can somewhat be difficult to kill enemies that are grouped up, but the fact that it can one-shot every enemy in almost every range makes the weapon extremely viable. Plus the penetration is also pretty good, so you don't need a lot of skills to spec into it to make it effective. You can just simply grab an edge and just be done with it. The effectiveness is at 8 out of 10. The attachments that it has somewhat makes the weapon somewhat weaker, mainly the CQC barrel. It decreases the ADS time, sure, and makes the weapon gun kick much more easier to control for some reason, but that doesn't really matter because it's a fucking sniper rifle. You don't really need it. All these bonus stats just don't really help the weapon. The big issue I have with the weapon's CQC barrel attachment is its reduced damage in the distance, and this hurts the sniper a little bit. Firstly, you are not able to one-shot a lot of enemies on the body, and there are like certain times where you're not able to kill a shield with a single hit on certain occasions. So this attachment sort of cucks the weapon over. Next is the viewpoint sight. Ignore the stats, they're completely useless, but the sight itself also offers a pretty good amount of zoom, mainly for focusing on mid-range engagements, but it's pretty good nonetheless. It's basically a huge dot. The stock itself just practically fucks the weapon over more, specifically the hipfire spread. You might think, why would I be hip-firing with a sniper rifle when it's a long-range weapon? There will be certain times where enemies get too close to you, and the only option you really have in your arsenal is to hip-fire. So, having that hip-fire spread to be wide enough completely makes the weapon literally worse. The overall rating I would give to it is a solid 3 out of 10. It practically hurts the weapon even more than it actually helps. The design looks incredible. I like the blue-yellow cartoonish look to it, and it has this unique feeling to it. Almost as if it's like one of those like cheap airsoft guns you buy at some creepy-ass stores you find at the back of an alley. But regardless, I do love it. It has a really unique aesthetic to it, and I give it a solid 9 out of 10. Next on the list is the MP7 Lycan. Listen? Whatever. The MP7 Lycan is a really good SMG that offers a pretty good amount of damage, solid recoil control, good rate of fire, and the MP7 literally shreds light enemies extremely quickly. The only issue I have is it somewhat struggles a little bit against shields and heavy units, but other than that, if you have really good trigger finger and can aim really well, it can assist you a lot. So there really isn't much else to say other than it's a solid 9 out of 10. The attachment is probably one of the best that any other preset weapons in the game has at the moment. Well, the second best, but which I will get into that in a little bit. Which actually genuinely helps the weapon a lot more than you think. The Slate RDS sight is one of the unique sights in the game that actually changes the reticle to a bite mark. Normally it's a dot, but instead it's a bite mark, which I do genuinely like. It has a distinct look to it, but the sight itself is pretty good, offering a faster ADS time, but slightly reduces the switching speed, which isn't really that much big of a deal. The light frame returns once again, and I don't really need to say it. It's basically from the Featherlight, essentially. The angled ghost grip makes the overall spirit much more tighter, and the horizontal recoil much more easier to control, but at the cost of the vertical recoil being harder to control. But the SMG itself is pretty easy to control, so don't even think about it. Finally, it has a speed pull mag which drastically helps the SMG a lot, and I don't really need to say anything about it. Besides, it's a solid 9 out of 10. The only complaint I really have is the stock sort of cucks the weapon over a little bit, but again, it's pretty good. The visual design of the weapon is incredible. The wolf design on the weapon looks extremely nice, and the bite mark that is applied to the stock is also adds a bit of personality to it. So it's a pretty good looking weapon, and the colors that it has on the weapon suits pretty well. So it's a 10 out of 10. Next is the American weapon, that is the Porch King shotgun. The shotgun is an effective weapon capable of deleting every single enemy to close to mid-range with a single shot, and with the right fucking skills, you're able to literally send every sort of SWAT officers back to the void. But the shotgun is practically useless on long range, but let's be honest, who really uses shotguns on long range? It's called common sense, people. So the effectiveness remains at 9 out of 10. The attachment itself is pretty okay, even though it's not much, it just helps a lot. The BioFit 4 end handle offers a much more faster cocking speed and a vertical recoil to be easier, but at the cost of the ADS time being much more slower, but who really cares when you can just literally hipfire everyone like it's fucking nothing. Finally, the range barrel allows you to do more damage in the distance and the overall spread to be much more tighter. The overall gun kick is nothing, so forget about it. The range barrel allows you to be able to one-shot enemies much more consistently while hipfiring or while aiming down the sights. So it's a pretty good amount of attachments, even though it's not much, but like I said, it does sort of depends on if it helps the weapon a lot. So it's just 9 out of 10. The visual design is...
America, fuck yeah! What the fuck is a kilometer?
8 out of 10. Next on the list is the Car 4 Monument. I don't really need to say anything about the effectiveness of the weapon, since it's basically the same thing as the Old Faithful but far less accurate, so it's a 6 out of 10, or 7 out of 10. The attachments of the weapon somewhat makes it slightly less effective than the Old Faithful. The CQC barrel, despite making the gun kick easier to control and the ADS time much more faster, the biggest downside is the reduced damage against distant targets. This really hurts the weapon a lot, and let's also not mention the fact that the reduced overall recoil makes the weapon go up higher, and don't even try to aim down the sights because this thing's iron sights is much more hideous than the Old Faithful. The Express Muzzle Brake is sort of a weird choice because it somewhat counters the negative effects of the CQC barrel entirely? Like, what's the point of having it? Am I missing something? I don't know. I don't really need to say anything. The Padded Tube is the only one that is somewhat okay. It just basically allows you to swap weapons much more quicker and transition to sprinting to fire much more quicker, but the recoil nerf is just practically what makes it useless at mid to long range. It's a solid weapon, but again, it gets a 4 out of 10 when it comes to the attachments, and honestly I'd rather shove myself in a pit of concrete rather than to be using this. But overall, the aesthetic of the weapon does indeed look nice. Again, I like the dark red and grey color to it, and the skulls that sort of like added to the weapon adds a bit of texture, and the nice little grip written on the weapon itself is solid, so it gets a 7 out of 10. Now let's get into one of my personal favorites out of all of them, the AK Ruthless preset. The AK itself is one of the #1 best assault rifles in the existence of the game, better than the Scar in my personal opinion. Despite its slower rate of fire than some of the other rifles, the recoil is easier and much more manageable, and the damage output and the handling is amazing. Plus the ammo economy is far more superior than the shitty Scar, so it already makes it a great weapon. Plus it's an old Soviet machinery, so it gets a 10 out of 10. I don't really need to say anything else about it. The modifications that are applied is splendid. It's pretty good, surprisingly. The line sight provides a medium zoom that is able to be used in almost every range, even on close range. And the optic itself, aka the reticle, is pretty nice. It is clear, it's simple, it doesn't like block a lot of your vision. Everything about the sight is pretty good except for the increased ADS time, which is practically forgettable. The rail barrel is an incredibly amazing attachment that allows you to deal bonus damage in the distance and the spread of the weapon being much more tighter, at the cost of increased ADS speed and the gun kick being slightly harsher, but again these are practically ignorable. Finally, the TQ stock, that is attached is also pretty good, offering a pretty good recoil handling on the weapon, but the handling of the weapon is already easy enough, so you don't really need to think about it too much. But all these effects, aka the attachments, are practically amazing, so it gets a solid 10 out of 10. The visual of the AK Ruthless is the only one that is somewhat disappointing, but I can somewhat understand what they were trying to be. Yeah, I'm getting this like feeling of edginess to it, and it tries to be this like cool rifle that's like to be aggressive or some shit, but again, it doesn't really look intimidating. But I like the ruthlessness written on the weapon and the green base color attached to it, but there's really nothing special except it gets a solid 7 out of 10. I'm gonna go through quick through the Poacher because it's not really a good one. The Moscone is an extremely powerful shotgun that is able to kill almost every single enemy much more consistently than any other shotgun available. Because of its higher damage and tighter spread, you are able to literally delete any sort of enemy with the right skills. But you need to be extremely accurate with it because you only get 2 shots. And you better make those shots count, otherwise the enemies are gonna cook you over more than ever. So it gets a 7 out of 10 when it comes to effectiveness. The modification that it offers is not really amazing, but it's somewhat okay. The ranged barrel allows you to do more damage at mid to close range, but you can actually snipe at certain enemies with the right skills applied to it, even snipers. And the stock that it has is really nothing special, so yeah, you can practically just forget about it. A solid 5 out of 10, and the visual design is so fucking awful, I really want to gauge my ISO just by looking at it. 2 out of 10. Finally to one of the best preset weapons in the entirety of the game, the Sentinel. The DMR is legit #1 best weapon in the entirety of Payday 3, able to literally one-shot every single enemy without any sort of issue whatsoever with a high rate of fire. What am I even talking about this? Everyone knows it's fucking overpowered. It's a 10 out of 10 for God's sakes. I don't really need to say anything about the attachments because they just buffed the weapon too much, honestly. The silencer is practically forgettable because it doesn't really affect it that much. The scope is where the good part comes in. This high magnification scope allows you to pair with certain skills like this, basically allowing you to one-shot enemies without any sort of fucking effort whatsoever. Another 10 out of 10 attachments. And I know there's like another attachment I missed, but who even cares at this point? It's the DMR we're talking about. There's literally no downside to this whatsoever, so you can practically just use it. The design, I love it. I adore it. I love the eagle. I love the blue and yellow like base color to it and everything. It's amazing. Mwah. It's a 10 out of 10. Yeah, I just realized it's a 10 out of 10 on everything. Yeah, I'm not surprised. And that's pretty much it for the first episode. I hope you enjoy it. Now, if you excuse me, I'm going to go and have some fun with the IRS. So if you excuse me, I'll be back soon. See you next year, because I'm probably going to end up in custody later or not. So yeah, goodbye.